r/MaliciousCompliance MIL announced my vasectomy at funeral, so I exposed her lies. The words hit me like a slap across the face at my grandfather's graveside. Well, at least we don't have to worry about Jake giving us any great-grandchildren, my mother-in-law Carol announced to the small circle of mourning relatives. He got himself snipped like a dog. The shovel of dirt I was holding to honor Grandpa's final send-off nearly slipped from my hands. Around me, aunts, uncles, and cousins turned to stare with a mixture of shock, confusion, and barely concealed judgment. My wife Sarah's face went chalk white beside me, her grip tightening on my arm like a vice. "Mom," Sarah hissed under her breath, but Carol was just getting started. "Sarah's been trying to talk him out of it for months," she continued, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue that hadn't seen a single tear. "But you know how selfish young men can be these days. No thought for what their wives actually want." That was a lie. Sarah had been the one to suggest the vasectomy after we both decided we were happy with our 2 kids. But Carol had a special talent for rewriting history to fit whatever narrative served her purposes in the moment. Uncle Mike shifted uncomfortably, clearly wishing he was anywhere else. Aunt Linda's eyebrows had disappeared into her hairline. Cousin Beth was recording the whole thing on her phone, probably for her Instagram story about family drama at funerals or whatever the hell she posted about. "This isn't the time or place," I started, but Carol cut me off. "When is the right time, Jake? When you've completely destroyed my daughter's dreams of a bigger family? When you've robbed her of the chance to give me more grandchildren?" Her voice carried across the cemetery, drawing stares from other funeral parties. "Poor Sarah's been crying herself to sleep every night since you made this selfish decision." Another lie. Sarah slept like a baby, especially after we'd made the choice together to prevent any more midnight feedings and diaper changes. We were done having kids, and we were both relieved about it. But that didn't matter to Carol. The truth never mattered to Carol. What mattered was the audience, the drama, and her ability to position herself as the long-suffering mother of a victimized daughter married to a monster, namely, me. "Mom, stop," Sarah said, louder this time, but her voice cracked with embarrassment and grief. "We were supposed to be saying goodbye to the man who taught me how to fish, who'd slipped me $20 bills at family gatherings, who told the worst dad jokes known to humanity. Instead, we were dealing with Carol's latest performance." The funeral director approached with the practiced diplomacy of someone who'd seen every possible family meltdown. "Perhaps we could continue this conversation after the service." Carol turned on him with the fury of a woman denied her spotlight. "This is family business. These people have a right to know what kind of man my daughter married. What kind of future she's facing because of his selfish choices." As I watched her command the attention of our grieving family members, weaponizing my medical decisions at my grandfather's funeral, something inside me snapped. This wasn't just embarrassing anymore. This was warfare. And Carol had just fired the first shot. She wanted to play games with family secrets. Fine. I knew secrets too. Lots of them. And unlike her carefully constructed lies, mine happened to be true. The nuclear option was looking more appealing by the second. The rest of the funeral passed in a blur of forced condolences and sideways glances. Every handshake came with a knowing look, every "sorry for your loss" carried an undertone of pity, not for my grandfather's passing, but for my apparently selfish life choices. Carol had poisoned the well, and now I was the villain in a story I didn't even know I was starring in. "Jake seems like such a nice young man," I overheard Aunt Linda whisper to her husband as we walked back to the cars. "It's such a shame about, you know." My jaw clenched so hard I thought my teeth might crack. Sarah hadn't said a word since the graveside incident. She sat rigid in the passenger seat as we drove to the reception at the church hall, staring out the window like she was seeing the neighborhood for the first time. When I reached over to touch her hand, she didn't pull away, but she didn't respond either. "Sarah, I'm sorry this happened." You know, none of what she said was. "I know." Her voice was flat, emotionless. "I know what's true and what isn't." "That's not the point." "Then what is the point?" She turned to look at me for the first time since the cemetery. "The point is that 37 people just heard my mother announce intimate details about our marriage at your grandfather's funeral. The point is that half our family now thinks you're controlling me, and the other half thinks I'm some desperate woman begging for babies you won't give me." She was right, and that made it worse. Carol's lies weren't just embarrassing, they were strategic. She created a narrative where Sarah was the victim and I was the villain, which meant any pushback from me would only reinforce the story. If I defended myself, I'd look defensive. If I stayed quiet, I'd look guilty. Classic Carol manipulation. "What do you want me to do?" I asked as we pulled into the church parking lot. Sarah was quiet for a long moment, watching her mother hold court near the entrance, surrounded by relatives hanging on her every word. "I don't know. But I can't keep living like this. Every family gathering, every holiday, every major life event, she finds a way to make it about her drama." That's when it hit me. This wasn't just about the vasectomy announcement. This was about years of accumulated damage. Carol's previous hits parade flashed through my mind, announcing Sarah's miscarriage before we were ready to tell people, accidentally letting slip that Sarah had been in therapy, spreading rumors about my job performance during a rough patch at work, telling everyone about our marriage counseling sessions like they were juicy gossip instead of private healing. Each incident had been explained away as concern, as love, as just being a worried mother who cared too much. But the pattern was clear. Carol collected our vulnerabilities like trophies, saving them for moments when she needed ammunition. "She's been doing this for years," I said, more to myself than to Sarah. "I know. No, I mean really doing this. Systematically. Every piece of private information we've ever trusted her with, she's weaponized all of it." Sarah nodded slowly. "Welcome to my childhood." As we sat there in the parking lot, watching Carol gesture dramatically to a cluster of cousins who were undoubtedly getting the extended version of today's performance, my phone buzzed with a text message. It was from my brother-in-law Mark, Sarah's younger brother. "Dude, I'm so sorry about Mom's bullshit today. She's telling people you forced Sarah into agreeing with the vasectomy. This is getting out of hand." Another buzz. This time from Sarah's cousin Jennifer. "Is everything okay? Your MIL is saying some pretty intense stuff about your marriage." My blood ran cold. Carol wasn't done. The funeral had just been the opening act. Sarah's phone started buzzing next. Then buzzing again. And again. Jesus, she muttered, pulling it out. Her face went progressively paler as she scrolled through the messages. She's really going for it. What's she saying now? Sarah's voice was hollow as she read. Jennifer says Mom told her you've been financially controlling me. That you won't let me have access to our savings account. She scrolled down. Cousin Amy says she heard you've been isolating me from the family. And apparently. Her voice cracked. Apparently I've lost so much weight because I'm wasting away from stress over our marriage. I stared at her in disbelief. Sarah had lost weight recently, but only because she'd started running again after our youngest finally slept through the night. She was healthier and happier than she'd been in years. She's building a case, I realized. This isn't just about embarrassing us. She's constructing an entire narrative where I'm some kind of abusive husband. The implications hit me like a freight train. If Carol was telling people I was controlling Sarah financially and isolating her from family, how long before someone suggested Sarah might be in danger? How long before Child Protective Services got an anonymous tip about the kid's welfare? My hands started shaking. Sarah, we need to shut this down. Now. But when I looked over at my wife, I saw something that made my stomach drop. She was crying, but not the angry tears I expected. These were tears of defeat. I can't do this anymore, Jake. I can't spend the rest of my life managing her chaos and protecting everyone from the fallout. I'm exhausted. Before I could respond, someone knocked on our car window. It was Uncle Mike, looking deeply uncomfortable. Sarah rolled down the window, hastily wiping her eyes. Hey, kids, Mike said awkwardly. Listen, I don't want to get in the middle of family business, but Carol's in there telling people some pretty serious stuff about your marriage. I thought you should know that she's saying Jake might be, well, that you might not be safe. What exactly did she say? I asked, trying to keep my voice level. Mike shifted his weight. She's telling people that you've been different lately. Angry. That Sarah's afraid to contradict you. She's making it sound like domestic violence might be involved. The world tilted sideways. This wasn't just character assassination anymore. This was Carol trying to destroy my entire life. That's insane, Sarah said, finding her voice. He's never. I know, honey, Mike said gently. Anyone who knows you two can see this is bullshit. But Carol's got Linda and some of the others pretty worked up. Linda's talking about staging an intervention. An intervention. For a marriage that didn't need intervening. For abuse that wasn't happening. Based on lies from a woman who couldn't stand that her daughter had chosen a life that didn't revolve around her drama. There's more, Mike continued reluctantly. She's saying the vasectomy was just the latest example of Jake making unilateral decisions. That he's been gradually taking control of more and more aspects of your life, and now he's taken away your choice to have children. I felt something cold and calculating settle in my chest. Carol had just crossed from malicious into dangerous. She wasn't just embarrassing us at family gatherings anymore, she was actively trying to convince our family that I was a threat to my own wife. But Carol had made one crucial mistake. She'd escalated to lies so big, so serious, that I was now fully justified in deploying every piece of ammunition I'd been collecting about her over the years. The nuclear option wasn't just appealing anymore. It was necessary. Uncle Mike, I said quietly, how would you feel about learning that pretty much everything Carol's told this family about herself and her kids over the past 5 years has been a lie? His eyebrows shot up. What do you mean? I looked at Sarah. She was watching me with something between fear and hope. I mean, it's time someone told the truth about Carol for once. Sarah grabbed my arm before I could say anything else. Jake, don't. Not here. Not now. But Uncle Mike was already hooked. What kind of lies are we talking about? I could see the internal war playing out on Sarah's face. Part of her wanted me to burn it all down, to finally expose her mother's decades of manipulation. But the other part, the part that had been trained since childhood to protect Carol from the consequences of her own actions, was screaming at me to stop. Jake, she whispered urgently. Think about what you're doing. Once you start this, there's no taking it back. She was right, but that ship had already sailed. Carol had made sure of that when she decided to tell our family I was abusing my wife. Some lines, once crossed, changed everything. I'm thinking very clearly, I said, meeting her eyes. Are you okay with everyone believing I'm controlling you? That you're afraid of me? That our kids are living in an unsafe home? Before Sarah could answer, my phone rang. It was my boss. Jake, I hate to bother you on the day of your grandfather's funeral, but I just got a very concerning call from someone claiming to be your mother-in-law. My blood turned to ice. What did she say? She said she was worried about your mental state. That you've been making erratic decisions lately and she's concerned it might affect your work performance. She mentioned something about domestic issues and suggested I might want to keep an eye on you. The phone felt like it was burning in my hand. Carol hadn't just attacked my marriage, she'd gone after my job. My career. My ability to provide for my family. Sir, I can explain. You don't need to explain anything, Jake. I've worked with you for 6 years. I know who you are. But I thought you should know that someone's actively trying to sabotage your reputation. You might want to handle whatever family situation this is before it escalates further. After I hung up, Uncle Mike was staring at me with new understanding. She called your work. Apparently. My voice sounded strange, disconnected. She's telling my boss I'm mentally unstable. Sarah's face had gone from pale to gray. Oh my God. Jake, she's completely lost it this time. What's going on? We turned to see Sarah's brother Mark approaching with his wife Jessica. Behind them, I could see more family members filing out of the church hall, probably sent by Carol to check on us or gather intelligence for her next round of storytelling. Your mother just caused me a conversation with my boss about my mental stability, I told Mark without preamble. His face darkened. She what? She called Jake's work, Sarah said, her voice getting stronger. She's telling people he's abusive. This has gone way beyond embarrassing us at family events. Mark ran a hand through his hair. Jesus, Mom. I knew she was upset about the vasectomy thing, but calling your work. That's... He trailed off, looking genuinely shocked. That's what, Mark. I pressed. Because from where I'm sitting, this looks like a coordinated campaign to destroy my marriage and my career. Jessica, who had been quiet until now, spoke up. There's something you guys should know. Carol's been calling family members all week, setting up today's drama. She called my mom 3 days ago asking about signs of controlling behavior in relationships and whether she thought you seemed different at the last family gathering. She's been planning this, Sarah breathed. The funeral announcement, the follow-up stories, calling your work, she planned all of it. Mark's expression shifted from shock to angry. That's why she insisted on riding to the funeral with us instead of driving herself. She wanted to make sure she had an audience when we got here. And why she kept asking me about your guys' marriage lately, trying to get me to say something negative. What did you tell her? Sarah asked. Nothing, because there's nothing to tell. You guys are happy. Anyone with eyes can see that. Mark's jaw tightened. But she kept pushing, asking if I'd noticed you losing weight, if Jake seemed more controlling lately, if you ever seemed afraid to disagree with him. The pieces were falling into place, and the picture they formed was terrifying. This wasn't an emotional outburst from a grieving woman at a funeral. This was a calculated assault that had been weeks in the making. She's been building a case file, I realized out loud. Collecting evidence for a narrative she planned to deploy today. But why? Jessica asked. What does she gain from this? Sarah laughed bitterly. Control. Drama. Attention. The same thing she always gets from stirring up chaos. But this time. She looked at me with something like determination. This time she went too far. My phone buzzed with another call. This time it was from my pediatrician's office. My hands were shaking as I answered. Mr. Thompson. This is Janet from Dr. Miller's office. We received a concerning call about your children's welfare, and we need to schedule an appointment to discuss some issues that have been brought to our attention. The world went silent except for the ringing in my ears. Carol had called our kid's doctor. The phone call with Dr. Miller's office lasted exactly 3 minutes and 17 seconds, but it felt like a lifetime. Janet explained that someone claiming to be Sarah's mother had called expressing serious concerns about our children's home environment, citing my alleged erratic behavior and Sarah's obvious distress and weight loss. We're required to follow up on all reports regarding child welfare, Janet said apologetically. Dr. Miller would like to see both children for wellness checks within the week. When I hung up, the small circle of family members around our car had grown. Word was spreading that something big was happening, and in typical family fashion, everyone wanted front row seats to the drama. What was that about? Mark asked, but he already knew from my expression. She called the kid's pediatrician, I said, my voice hollow. Reported suspected child endangerment. The collective intake of breath was audible. Even Uncle Mike, who'd seen decades of family dysfunction, looked stunned. Mom called CPS. Sarah whispered. Not CPS directly. But she called Dr. Miller's office with concerns. They have to investigate. I looked at my wife, seeing my own panic reflected in her eyes. Sarah, she's trying to get our kids taken away. She wouldn't, Sarah started, then stopped. Because of course she would. This was Carol we were talking about. She absolutely would, Mark said grimly. And she'd tell herself she was saving them from a dangerous situation that she created. Jessica was scrolling through her phone. Guys, it's already on Facebook. Cousin Beth posted about family drama at the funeral and tagged half the relatives. The comments are, not good. She showed us the screen. Beth's post had a crying face emoji and read, please pray for my cousin Sarah. Found out some disturbing things about her marriage today. Sometimes the people we trust most are hiding dark secrets. Hashtag family first, hashtag prayers needed. The comments were a mix of concerned relatives asking what happened and virtual strangers offering unsolicited advice about domestic violence resources. 37 likes already, Jessica said quietly. And it's only been up for 10 minutes. I felt something fundamental shift inside my chest. This wasn't just about our family anymore. Carol had made this public, brought social media into it, created a permanent digital record of her lies. Our kids would someday be able to Google their parents' names and find this garbage. That's it, I said, standing up straighter. I'm done protecting her. Sarah grabbed my arm. Jake, wait. Let's think this through. Think what through? She called my job. She called our kid's doctor. She's posting lies on social media. What exactly are we supposed to think through? The consequences, Sarah said desperately. If you expose her lies, it won't just hurt her. It'll destroy relationships with people who believed her. It'll split the family. Some of these people will never forgive us for embarrassing her publicly. And what's the alternative? I demanded. Let everyone keep believing I'm abusing you. Let Dr. Miller think our kids are in danger. Let my boss wonder if I'm mentally unstable. Let our children grow up with this hanging over their heads. Mark stepped forward. What exactly are we talking about exposing here? I looked at Sarah. She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and nodded. For starters, I said, Carol's been telling everyone she's been supporting her elderly mother financially. She set up a GoFundMe last year that raised $4,000 for Grandma Rose's medical expenses. Yeah, I donated to that, Uncle Mike said. We all did. Grandma Rose died 3 years ago. Carol used the money for a cruise to the Bahamas. The silence that followed was deafening. That's fraud, Jessica whispered. It gets worse, I continued, feeling like I was jumping off a cliff. Remember when she told everyone that Mark got into Cornell but had to turn it down because of family financial problems? Mark's head snapped up. What about it? I looked at Sarah again. She nodded grimly. You never got into Cornell, Mark. You didn't even apply. Carol made it up to explain why you went to community college instead of following some imaginary academic success story she'd been bragging about. Mark's face went through several emotions before settling on her confusion. But she showed people the acceptance letter. She created a fake one. Sarah found the Photoshop file on Carol's computer last Christmas. Why would she lie about that? Mark asked, but his voice suggested he was already figuring it out. Because the truth, that you chose community college because you wanted to study automotive repair, which you're brilliant at, wasn't impressive enough for her social media narrative. Jessica was staring at her husband with dawning understanding. Mark, remember how weird your mom was about your graduation? How she kept trying to get you to say you were planning to transfer to a 4-year school? Mark nodded slowly. She kept introducing me to her friends as her son, who's taking a gap year before starting his real college career. Because she'd already told them you were Ivy League material, I said. She had to maintain the lie. More family members were approaching our impromptu parking lot gathering, drawn by the obvious tension. I could see Carol through the church windows, gesturing animatedly to a group of relatives, probably adding new embellishments to her stories about my alleged crimes. There's more, I said, my voice getting stronger. A lot more. Tell them about the cancer, Sarah said quietly, and I could hear 20 years of exhaustion in her voice. My stomach dropped. Sarah, are you sure? Tell them. Mark looked between us, his face already showing dread. What cancer? 2 years ago, your mother told everyone she'd been diagnosed with breast cancer, I said, watching his expression crumble in real time. She posted about it on Facebook, started a meal train, had people driving her to fake chemotherapy appointments. The appointments were real, Uncle Mike said defensively. I drove her to 3 of them myself. The appointments were real, Sarah confirmed. But they weren't for chemo. They were for cosmetic consultations. She was getting Botox and fillers while people thought she was fighting for her life. Jessica's hand flew to her mouth. Oh my God. I organized that meal train. I had 15 people bringing her dinner every week for 3 months. And I took vacation time to help with her recovery, Mark said, his voice hollow. She had me doing her grocery shopping, cleaning her house, driving her everywhere because she was too weak from treatment. She never had cancer, I said. She got the idea after her friend Linda was diagnosed. Suddenly Carol needed that same level of attention and sympathy. But the Facebook posts, Uncle Mike protested. The pictures of her looking sick. Makeup, Sarah said bitterly. She watched YouTube tutorials on how to look like a cancer patient. Drew circles under her eyes, used contouring to make her face look gaunt. The growing crowd around us had gone completely silent. I could see people's phones coming out, some probably texting others, some definitely recording. The irony wasn't lost on me. Carol had started this very public character assassination, and now it was backfiring spectacularly. She shaved off pieces of her hair, Sarah continued, her voice getting stronger with each revelation. Not all of it, just enough to make it look thinner when she posted selfies. She bought a wig and told everyone the hospital recommended getting one before she lost everything. Cousin Beth had appeared at the edge of our circle, her face pale. But she rang the bell. I was there when she rang the bell at the cancer center to celebrate beating it. Anyone can ring that bell, I said. She walked into the oncology ward and rang it while the staff was dealing with actual patients. When security asked what she was doing, she claimed she was there for a follow-up appointment. Jesus Christ, Mark breathed. All those nights I spent taking care of her. Making her soup because she said she couldn't keep anything down. Listening to her cry about being afraid to die. She cried because she was afraid of getting caught, Sarah said. The only reason she beat cancer so quickly was because Linda's actual treatment was going well, and Carol needed to wrap up her storyline before someone started asking for medical details. Beth's phone was shaking in her hands. I shared every single one of her posts. I tagged all my friends asking them to pray for her. I organized a benefit dinner at my church. The benefit dinner. I'd forgotten about that. The benefit raised $1,800, I said. Money that people scraped together thinking they were helping with medical bills. Where did that money go? Uncle Mike asked, though his tone suggested he already suspected. New furniture for her living room, Sarah said. She sent me pictures of her shopping spree the same week as the benefit. Called it her celebration of life furniture. Mark was staring at the church where his mother was undoubtedly still holding court, spinning new lies about what a terrible husband and father I was. She let me miss work to take her to appointments that weren't real. She had me researching cancer support groups, buying special pillows for chemo patients, learning how to cook for someone with treatment-related nausea. She studied up on symptoms, I added. Spent hours on cancer forums learning what to complain about. She knew exactly what to say to make it believable. But why? Beth asked. Why would someone fake cancer? Because Linda was getting casseroles and flowers and constant check-in calls, Sarah said. Because everyone was rallying around her with love and support. Carol couldn't stand that someone else was getting that kind of attention. So she gave herself cancer, Jessica said flatly. Temporarily, I corrected. Just long enough to collect the sympathy and support, then made a miraculous recovery that she credited to positive thinking and family prayers. Uncle Mike was looking sick. I told my entire church to pray for her. I had the pastor mention her by name during services. And I'm sure she loved every minute of that, Sarah said. The crowd around us had grown to include most of the funeral reception. People were whispering, passing phones around, checking Carol's old Facebook posts with new understanding. The atmosphere had shifted from confused concern to something harder and angrier. There's more, I said, and several people groaned audibly. How much more? Mark asked weakly. I looked through the church windows at Carol, still animated and dramatic, completely unaware that her carefully constructed house of lies was collapsing in the parking lot. We're just getting started. The moment I said, we're just getting started, I saw Carol through the church window turn toward the parking lot. Someone inside had obviously texted her about our impromptu family meeting, because her face went from animated storytelling to panic damage control in real time. She's coming, Sarah warned, following my gaze. Sure enough, Carol was speedwalking toward the exit, her funeral outfit suddenly looking less like mourning attire and more like battle armor. Behind her trailed a small entourage of relatives she'd been filling with poison about my alleged abuse. Keep talking, Mark said urgently. I want to hear it all before she gets out here and starts spinning new lies. I took a deep breath. Remember when she told everyone that Sarah had a miscarriage between our 2 kids? Several people nodded. It had been a whole thing, sympathy cards, flowers, Carol posting grief-stricken social media updates about her lost grandbaby. We never had a miscarriage, I said flatly. Sarah had food poisoning from a restaurant, spent one night throwing up. Carol decided that was morning sickness, announced to everyone that Sarah was pregnant, then when Sarah wasn't actually pregnant, turned it into a miscarriage story for maximum drama. But I sent flowers, Beth protested. I wrote a sympathy card about your loss. Which Carol kept, Sarah said bitterly. She has a whole box of sympathy cards for tragedies that never happened. She rereads them when she's feeling sorry for herself. Uncle Mike was shaking his head slowly. The GoFundMe for her mother, the fake cancer, lying about Mark's college acceptance, making up a miscarriage. What else? The break-in, Sarah said, and I saw Mark's face darken. What about the break-in? He demanded. Last year, Carol had reported a break-in at her house. Someone had allegedly stolen her jewelry, electronics, and cash she kept in a bedroom safe. The family had rallied around her, helping file insurance claims, installing new security systems, even taking shifts staying overnight because she was too traumatized to be alone. There was no break-in, I said. She sold her jewelry to pay credit card debt, sold the electronics to a pawn shop, and spent the cash on a gambling trip to Atlantic City. But the police report, Uncle Mike started, was real, Sarah confirmed. She filed a false police report to make the insurance fraud look legitimate. She even broke her own back window and messed up her bedroom to stage the scene. Mark's voice was dangerously quiet. I spent 6 weeks sleeping on her couch because she said she was having PTSD nightmares about the break-in. She was having nightmares, I said. About getting caught committing insurance fraud. Jesus, Jessica whispered. Mark, you were going to couples therapy because the stress of taking care of your mom was affecting our marriage. Through the church windows, I could see Carol had reached the door. She was gesturing frantically to her followers, probably explaining that we were having some kind of breakdown in the parking lot and needed intervention. How long have you 2 known about all this? Mark asked, looking between Sarah and me. Pieces of it for years, Sarah said. But we didn't put it all together until recently. Every time something seemed off, she had an explanation. Every time we questioned her stories, she'd cry or get angry or make us feel guilty for not supporting her during her crisis. She's been gaslighting the entire family, Mark realized. For decades, I confirmed. And now she's trying to do it to destroy my marriage because we made a decision about our family that she didn't approve of. Carol burst through the church doors, her face flushed with righteous indignation. What is going on out here? She demanded, striding toward our group. People are coming to me with the most ridiculous stories. Stories about your fake cancer. Mark interrupted, standing up to face his mother. Or stories about the grandmother who died 3 years before you started that GoFundMe. Carol stopped walking. For just a moment, her mask slipped, and I saw pure calculation in her eyes as she assessed the situation. How much did we know? How much had we told? How could she spin this? Mark, honey, you're clearly upset about your grandfather's passing, she said, switching to her concerned mother voice. Grief makes people say things they don't mean. Did you or did you not fake having breast cancer? Mark demanded, his voice carrying across the parking lot. Carol looked around at the faces surrounding her, family members she'd manipulated, lied to, and stolen from for years. Some looked skeptical, others angry, but most just looked like they were finally seeing her clearly for the first time. I don't know what Jake has told you, she said, playing her last card, but considering his recent mental health issues. Enough, Sarah said, stepping forward. Just stop, Mom. It's over. The word enough hung in the air like a gunshot. Sarah had never spoken to her mother like that, not in the 32 years I'd known them both. Carol's face went through a rapid succession of emotions, shock, hurt, rage, and then something calculating. Sarah Elizabeth, Carol said, using the full name like Sarah was still 5 years old, you're clearly being manipulated by your husband. This is exactly what I've been trying to tell people, he's isolated you from your family, turned you against your own mother. Mom, I found the Photoshop files, Sarah interrupted, her voice steady but loud enough for everyone to hear. Mark's fake Cornell letter, the doctored medical reports you used for the cancer scam, the edited bank statements for the GoFundMe fraud. They're all on your computer. I've seen them. Carol's face went pale, but she recovered quickly. You went through my personal computer. Without permission. That's. She turned to the gathered crowd, appealing to them. You see. This is what I'm talking about. They're violating my privacy, making up stories. I have screenshots, Sarah said simply, pulling out her phone. The parking lot went dead silent except for the distant sound of traffic. Carol stared at the phone in Sarah's hand like it was a loaded weapon, which in many ways, it was. You're bluffing, Carol said, but her voice cracked slightly. Sarah's finger hovered over her phone screen. The cancer photos are particularly interesting. 15 different versions of the same selfie, each one making you look progressively sicker. Very thorough work. I watched Carol's supporters, the relatives who'd followed her out of the church to defend her from our cruel lies, slowly start to back away. Aunt Linda, who'd been ready to stage an intervention for my alleged abuse, was staring at Carol with dawning horror. Linda, Carol said desperately, turning to her closest ally, you know me. You know I would never. I drove you to chemotherapy, Linda said quietly. I sat in waiting rooms while you were getting treatment. I held your hand while you cried about dying. I was scared. You were acting, Linda's voice got louder. You were performing for an audience while I was genuinely terrified of losing my friend. More phones were coming out now. People were pulling up Carol's old Facebook posts, cross-referencing dates, looking at her cancer journey with new eyes. I could see the exact moment when the pieces clicked for each person, the slight widening of eyes, the sharp intake of breath, the look of betrayal that comes with realizing you've been played. This is ridiculous, Carol said, but her usual commanding presence was cracking. You're all going to believe lies over family. Jake has clearly brainwashed my daughter. Brainwashed her into what? Mark demanded. Into having a happy marriage. Into making responsible decisions about their family. Into finally standing up to your manipulation. Carol's eyes darted around the circle, looking for support and finding none. Even Beth had stopped recording, her phone hanging limp in her hand as she stared at her aunt with disgust. There's more, I said, because Carol needed to understand that we weren't just pushing back, we were ending this. The inheritance from Great Aunt Ruth that you told everyone went to charity. The story about Sarah's eating disorder in high school. The reason you really got fired from the hospital. Carol's face went white as a sheet. You wouldn't dare. Try me, I said. You called my boss. You called our pediatrician. You tried to convince our family that I'm abusing my wife at my grandfather's funeral. What exactly do you think I wouldn't dare do at this point? Behind Carol, I could see more people emerging from the church, drawn by the commotion. This was about to get much bigger, much more public, and much more permanent. Carol seemed to realize it too, because her next words came out in a panic. If you destroy me, you destroy this entire family. Carol's threat hung in the air like smoke from a house fire. If you destroy me, you destroy this entire family. No, Mom, Sarah said, her voice stronger than I'd ever heard it. You already did that. We're just finally admitting it. But even as my wife spoke those words, I could see the calculation working behind Carol's eyes. She wasn't done fighting, she was regrouping. And I realized with growing dread that she still had ammunition we hadn't accounted for. Fine, Carol said, her voice dropping to that deadly quiet tone that had terrified Sarah as a child. You want to air dirty laundry? Let's talk about why Jake really got that vasectomy. My blood turned to ice. What are you talking about? Let's talk about the paternity test results you thought I didn't know about. The world tilted sideways. Several people gasped, and I heard Beth's phone hit the asphalt as she fumbled it. Sarah grabbed my arm so hard I winced, but her grip was nothing compared to the vice closing around my chest. That's not, I started, but Carol was already in full swing. Tell them about the envelope from the lab that came to my house by mistake last month, she continued, her voice carrying across the parking lot with practiced precision. The one addressed to you, about our sweet little Emma. You opened my mail. Sarah's voice was barely a whisper, but I could hear the panic underneath. Emma. Our 6-year-old daughter with the bright red hair that didn't match either of our brown locks. The hair that looked exactly like Sarah's college boyfriend Danny, who'd been in town right around the time Emma was conceived. The hair that had sparked exactly one moment of doubt in 8 years of marriage, a doubt so brief and shameful that I'd gotten the test done and immediately regretted it. The test that had confirmed what I already knew in my heart, Emma was mine in every way that mattered. Biology was just biology. But Carol didn't know the results. She couldn't know the results, because the envelope that came to her house was just the acknowledgement of payment, not the actual results. Which meant she was bluffing, throwing a Hail Mary based on incomplete information. Except everyone around us didn't know that. Jake. Mark's voice was carefully neutral, but I could hear the doubt creeping in. What is she talking about? The parking lot had gone dead silent except for the sound of my heart hammering against my ribs. Phones were definitely recording now. This would be on social media within minutes, analyzed and dissected by relatives and strangers alike. Carol smiled with the satisfaction of someone who just played what she thought was a winning card. Suddenly not so eager to share family secrets, are we? But as I looked at the faces around me, some shocked, some confused, some already passing judgment, something unexpected happened. Instead of feeling ashamed or defensive, I felt clear. Absolutely, crystalline clear. Because I realized that this was exactly what Carol had been doing to all of us for years. Taking our private doubts, our human moments of weakness, our completely normal struggles, and weaponizing them. Making us feel guilty for being human while she paraded her fabricated dramas for sympathy. I'd gotten a paternity test because I'd had a moment of doubt. So what? Most parents had moments of doubt about something. The difference was that I'd actually verified the truth instead of building elaborate lies around my insecurities. You're right, I said, and Carol's triumphant expression flickered with confusion. I did get a paternity test for Emma. Sarah's grip on my arm tightened, but when I looked at her, I saw something unexpected in her eyes, not fear, but a kind of fierce pride. And you know what it said? I continued, looking directly at Carol. It said what I already knew, that Emma is my daughter. 100%. But you opened stolen mail and tried to create a scandal anyway. Carol's face shifted from triumph to uncertainty. But the envelope was a payment confirmation, not results, Sarah said, stepping up beside me. Which means you've been sitting on incomplete information for a month, waiting for the perfect moment to use it as a weapon. The crowd was processing this new information, and I could see the tide turning again. Mark looked relieved. Uncle Mike was shaking his head at Carol's manipulation. Even Aunt Linda looked disgusted. But Carol wasn't finished. She never was. Well then let's talk about something else, she said, her voice getting more desperate and therefore more dangerous. Let's talk about the real reason Sarah's been going to therapy twice a week. My wife went rigid beside me, and I knew we'd just entered entirely new territory. Let's talk about the real reason Sarah's been going to therapy twice a week, Carol announced, her voice cutting through the parking lot like a blade. I felt Sarah go completely still beside me, her breathing shallow and quick. This was different from the paternity test bluff. This was something Carol actually knew about, something private that Sarah had trusted her with during a vulnerable moment. Mom, don't, Sarah whispered, but her voice was lost in the crowd's murmur of renewed interest. Postpartum depression, Carol continued, clearly energized by having found another pressure point. Severe postpartum depression that she's been hiding from everyone, including some of you who've been watching her children. The words hit like a physical blow. Sarah's therapy wasn't a secret from me. I drove her to half the appointments, but it was private. Something she'd been working through after our youngest was born, something she'd specifically asked her mother to keep confidential while she healed. That's why she lost all that weight, Carol pressed on, building her new narrative in real time. That's why she's been so distant at family gatherings. Jake's been covering for her because he's afraid people will judge her parenting. I could see the crowd processing this information differently than Carol's other lies. This didn't sound like fraud or manipulation, this sounded like a legitimate family struggle that explained some behaviors people had noticed but been too polite to mention. And the vasectomy? Carol's voice took on a tone of false sympathy. Jake got it because Sarah had such a severe breakdown after the last baby that he's terrified of her going through pregnancy again. But instead of getting her proper help, he made a permanent decision to avoid the problem. The silence that followed was different from before. This wasn't the shocked silence of discovering lies, this was the uncomfortable silence of people thinking they were finally hearing the truth. Carol had taken real information and twisted it into a narrative that made me look controlling and Sarah look unstable. Sarah's been struggling, Carol continued, her voice now dripping with concerned mother authenticity, and instead of supporting her through therapy and recovery, Jake's been making unilateral decisions about their future. The vasectomy wasn't about being done having kids, it was about preventing Sarah from having the choice when she gets better. Aunt Linda was nodding slowly, and I could see other family members exchanging knowing looks. Of course, it all made sense now. The weight loss, the missed family events, the vasectomy timing. Carol had just provided a perfectly reasonable explanation for everything, wrapped in just enough truth to be believable. That's why I've been so worried, Carol said, really hitting her stride now. Sarah's been getting better in therapy, talking about maybe wanting one more baby someday, and Jake panicked. He scheduled the vasectomy without telling her it was permanent. That's not true, Sarah said, but her voice was shaky, and I could see people interpreting that as emotional fragility rather than anger. Honey, you don't have to protect him, Carol said gently, stepping towards Sarah with practiced maternal concern. Everyone here loves you. We just want to make sure you're getting the support you need. Mark was looking between his sister and his mother with growing confusion. Sarah, are you okay? The question was innocent enough, but I could see how it played into Carol's hands. Any answer Sarah gave would either confirm the depression story or make her look like she was in denial. I'm fine, Sarah said, which was exactly what someone who wasn't fine would say. She's been doing so much better, Carol continued, not missing a beat. That's why today was so hard for her. Jake announcing their private medical decisions at a funeral, in front of everyone, it was a setback. But I hadn't announced anything. Carol had. Yet somehow, in her retelling, I'd become the one who'd made our private business public. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number, just saw the Facebook video. Is your wife getting the help she needs? The Facebook video. Someone had posted our entire confrontation online, and now strangers were weighing in on my wife's mental health. Everything was spiraling completely out of control. I looked around the parking lot, seeing how Carol's latest manipulation was landing. She'd taken Sarah's private therapy journey, something she'd courageously undertaken to work through normal postpartum struggles, and weaponized it into evidence of instability. Worse, she'd rewritten the entire vasectomy narrative to make me look like a controlling husband making medical decisions behind my wife's back. Sarah's been in therapy since Emma was born, I said clearly, deciding transparency was our only weapon left. For postpartum anxiety that she's handled beautifully. But that's not why we decided on the vasectomy. Jake, don't, Sarah started, but I pressed on. We decided together, after months of discussion, that we were complete as a family of 4. Sarah suggested the vasectomy first because she was tired of hormonal birth control side effects. Carol's mask slipped for just a moment. That's not what you told me, Sarah. I never told you anything about the vasectomy, Sarah shot back, finding her voice. You found out from my medical insurance explanation of benefits that was mailed to your house by mistake. Just like the paternity test paperwork. Uncle Mike's eyebrows shot up. Why is Sarah's medical mail going to your house, Carol? Before Carol could answer, my phone rang again. This time it was my neighbor. Jake. Listen, there are 2 women at your front door asking questions about Emma and your younger son. They say they're from family services, following up on a report. My blood turned to ice. What kind of questions? About your parenting, your mental state, whether Sarah seems afraid of you. I told them you guys are at a funeral, but they want to know when you'll be home. CPS. Carol hadn't just called our pediatrician, she'd called Child Protective Services. When I hung up, the parking lot was watching me with new intensity. Family Services is at our house, I announced, my voice carrying over the crowd. Someone reported us as unfit parents. Sarah grabbed my arm. What? Mark's face darkened as he turned to his mother. Mom, what did you do? I made a report about children who might be in danger, Carol said, lifting her chin defiantly. That's what responsible adults do when they see warning signs. Warning signs like what? Jessica demanded. Like a father making permanent reproductive decisions without his wife's consent. Like a mother struggling with mental health issues while her husband makes her miss family gatherings to hide her condition. Every word was designed to sound reasonable taken individually, but together they painted a picture of dysfunction that would absolutely trigger a CPS investigation. Carol had built a case file of half-truths and context-free facts that would look damning to any social worker. She's not hiding anything, Mark said, but I could hear the doubt creeping into his voice. Are you, Sarah? The way he asked the question, gentle, concerned, like he was talking to someone fragile, made my wife flinch visibly. I missed family gatherings because I was taking care of myself, Sarah said, her voice getting stronger. Because therapy appointments were more important than Easter dinner drama. See? Carol said triumphantly. She admits it. She's been prioritizing mental health treatment over family obligations. The crowd murmured, and I realized Carol had just scored another point. In her world, choosing therapy over family events was evidence of crisis rather than wisdom. My phone buzzed with another unknown number, saw your story online. My ex used CPS to harass me too. Document everything. Our story was online. Strangers were following our family destruction in real time, offering unsolicited advice about custody battles and domestic disputes. This wasn't just about embarrassment anymore. This was about our children potentially being removed from our home based on lies told by a woman who just spent an hour being exposed as a serial fraudster. But somehow, she was winning. Looking at the circle of family members around me, I could see Carol's latest strategy working. By mixing real information about Sarah's therapy with fabricated concerns about our marriage, she created a narrative that sounded more credible than her previous lies. People were nodding, exchanging worried glances, and I could practically see them thinking, well, that explains everything. We need to get home, I told Sarah urgently. CPS won't wait around forever, and if we're not there to answer their questions. It looks like you're avoiding them, Mark finished, and I could see he was already buying into his mother's story. Sarah, maybe you should talk to someone official. Someone who can help. I am talking to someone, Sarah snapped. My therapist. Who I see twice a week for postpartum anxiety, not whatever mom is trying to make it sound like. But Carol was ready for that too. Twice a week for 6 months, sweetie. That's not normal postpartum adjustment, that's serious intervention. Jessica's phone buzzed, and she glanced at it with growing alarm. Guys, this Facebook video already has 300 shares. People are tagging local news stations. Local news. Perfect. Nothing said, stable family environment, like having your domestic disputes featured on the evening broadcast. What exactly did you tell CPS? I demanded, turning back to Carol. The truth, she said primly. That I'm concerned about my grandchildren's welfare given the instability in their home environment. What instability? Sarah's voice was rising. Our kids are happy, healthy, well-adjusted. Emma's been asking me if mommy and daddy are getting divorced, Carol interrupted smoothly. She's been worried about all the fighting at home. My jaw dropped. There is no fighting at home. Emma's never said anything like that. She confided in me last weekend when you dropped the kids off, Carol continued, her voice taking on that syrupy concerned grandmother tone. She said mommy cries a lot and daddy looks angry all the time. Another lie, but this one was diabolically clever. Emma had spent exactly 0 time alone with Carol last weekend, we'd been there the entire visit. But to everyone listening, this sounded like a grandmother sharing legitimate concerns from a worried 6-year-old. Uncle Mike was shaking his head slowly. Kids don't make up stuff like that, Jake. She didn't make it up, I said desperately. Carol did. But I could see I was losing them. Every denial I made sounded more defensive, more like exactly what an abusive husband would say when confronted with evidence. My phone rang again. This time it was Dr. Miller's office. Mr. Thompson, we've been contacted by Child Protective Services about your children. They're requesting all medical records immediately. We need you to come in first thing Monday morning. When I hung up, Mark was staring at me with something approaching pity. Jake, maybe this intervention is a good thing. Maybe you guys need outside help to sort through whatever's happening. Intervention. He'd used Carol's word, bought into her framing completely. My brother-in-law, someone who'd known me for over a decade, was now looking at me like I was a potential threat to my own family. There's nothing to sort through, I said, but even I could hear how hollow it sounded. Then you won't mind cooperating with the investigation, Carol said sweetly. If everything's as perfect as you claim. The trap was perfect. Cooperating made me look guilty. Refusing to cooperate made me look guiltier. And somewhere in the background of this nightmare, our actual children were probably wondering why mommy and daddy were taking so long to come home from great-grandpa's funeral. Sarah's phone buzzed with a call from our babysitter. Emma's asking when you're coming home. She says her tummy hurts. Our daughter was anxious, waiting for parents who were stuck in a parking lot fighting a war they couldn't win. That's when I realized Carol's most devastating move. She'd made defending ourselves into evidence against us. The babysitter's text about Emma's stomachache was the breaking point. My 6-year-old was sitting at home worried sick while we stood in a funeral home parking lot getting character assassinated by her grandmother. We're leaving, I announced, grabbing Sarah's hand. Our kids need us more than this circus does. But Carol wasn't done. Running away from family concern isn't going to help your children, Jake. No, but getting away from you will, Sarah shot back, her voice finally carrying the anger I'd been waiting to hear. Mark stepped forward, blocking our path to the car. Wait. Just, wait. If there's really nothing wrong, then why are you so afraid to address these concerns? Because addressing them legitimizes them, I said. Because every minute we spend defending ourselves from lies is another minute our actual children are wondering where their parents are. Or it's another minute you're avoiding accountability, Aunt Linda said quietly, and I realized Carol had successfully poisoned even the relatives who'd seemed sympathetic to us earlier. My phone buzzed with yet another call from an unknown number. I declined it, but not before seeing several new text previews. Saw the video, praying for those kids. Is this the family from Oakwood Elementary? Someone should call the school counselor. The school. Jesus, this was going to follow our children to school. Jake, Uncle Mike said carefully, maybe Mark's right. Maybe sitting down with a counselor or mediator would help everyone feel more comfortable. Comfortable with what? Sarah demanded. Comfortable with my mother destroying our family based on lies. Sarah, honey, Carol interjected, your reaction right now is exactly what I'm worried about. This level of anger, this defensiveness, it's not healthy. The manipulation was masterful. Carol had created a scenario where any emotion we displayed could be used as evidence of instability. Anger meant we were volatile. Calm meant we were hiding something. Leaving meant we were avoiding accountability. You know what's not healthy? Sarah said, her voice rising. Faking cancer. Stealing money from relatives. Filing false police reports. Making up stories about your own grandchildren. I never made up anything about Emma and little Michael, Carol said, but there was something too quick about her denial. Sarah's eyes narrowed. What haven't you told us, Mom? Nothing. I'm just concerned about their well-being given everything I've observed. What have you observed? I interrupted. You see our kids maybe twice a month, always with us present. When exactly did you observe anything concerning? Carol's eyes darted around the circle, looking for support. A mother notices things. Little signs. Changes in behavior. Like what? Mark pressed, and I could tell he was starting to see through her vague accusations. Emma's been more clingy lately. And Michael seems anxious around Jake. Michael's 3, Sarah said incredulously. He's anxious around everyone except his parents. But I could see Carol building towards something bigger, something she'd been saving. Her expression shifted from defensive to calculated, and my stomach dropped. There's something else, she said quietly, and the parking lot went silent again. Something I didn't want to mention because I was hoping it would resolve itself. Here we go, Sarah muttered, but her voice was tight with worry. Last week, when you brought the kids by for Sunday dinner, Carol began, her voice taking on that carefully modulated tone that meant she was about to drop a bomb. I found bruises on Emma's arm. The world stopped. Complete, absolute silence except for the sound of blood rushing in my ears. Bruises that looked like fingerprints, Carol continued, her voice heavy with manufactured concern. When I asked Emma about them, she got very quiet and said she'd fallen off her bike. Because she did fall off her bike, Sarah said, but her voice was shaking now. She crashed into the Hendersons' fence trying to avoid their dog. That's what I hoped, Carol said sadly. But the pattern didn't look like fence injuries to me. It looked like someone had grabbed her arm. Hard. The accusation of bruises on Emma hit like a physical blow. I watched the faces around me shift from skeptical to genuinely alarmed, and I knew Carol had just played her nuclear option. You're accusing me of hurting my daughter, I said, my voice barely controlled. I'm not accusing anyone of anything, Carol said with practiced innocence. I'm sharing observations that concern me as a grandmother. Mark's face had gone pale. Mom, that's a serious accusation. Which is why I documented it, Carol said, pulling out her phone. I took pictures before the bruises faded, just in case they were needed later. My blood turned to ice. Pictures. She had fabricated evidence. Show them, Sarah demanded, her voice stronger than I expected. Show everyone these pictures right now. Carol's finger hovered over her phone screen, but something flickered in her expression. I don't think putting a child's injuries on display for entertainment is appropriate. Show them the pictures, Mom, Sarah pressed, stepping closer. If you're so concerned about Emma's welfare that you called CPS, then surely you'd want everyone to see the evidence. This isn't a courtroom, Sarah. I don't need to prove anything to. Yes, you do, Mark interrupted, and I heard steel in his voice for the first time. If you're accusing Jake of child abuse, you absolutely need to show proof. Carol's eyes darted around the circle, looking for an escape route. The lighting out here isn't good for viewing photos. Then send them to me, Jessica said, holding up her phone. I'll put them on my screen with full brightness. Or better yet, Uncle Mike added, send them to all of us. If there's evidence of abuse, everyone should see it. The crowd was closing in, and Carol's usual manipulative tactics weren't working. People wanted concrete evidence, not emotional manipulation. The photos are on my home computer, Carol said weakly. I transferred them for safekeeping. Convenient, Sarah said flatly. Just like how all your other evidence always seems to be somewhere else when people actually ask to see it. But I could see the damage was already spreading. Beth was typing furiously on her phone, probably updating her Facebook followers about the latest development. Other relatives were whispering among themselves, processing the possibility that I might actually be abusing my children. My phone rang again. This time it was our babysitter, and her voice was panicked when I answered. Jake, there are news vans pulling up to your house. And the CPS workers are asking me questions about Emma's bike accident last week. They want to know if I've ever seen unexplained injuries on the kids. News vans. The story had gone viral, and now we had media camping outside our home while our children were inside, probably terrified and confused. We're coming home now, I told her, but before I could hang up, I heard Emma's voice in the background. Is that Daddy? Why are there cameras outside? Did we do something bad? My daughter thought she was in trouble. My 6-year-old was watching strangers with cameras gather outside her house and wondering if she'd done something wrong. Sarah, we need to leave now, I said urgently. Emma's scared, and this is about to get much worse. Running home to coach the children on their stories? Carol asked loudly enough for everyone to hear. The implication was clear, and I saw several people nod like it made perfect sense. Of course an abusive father would rush home when CPS and reporters showed up. No, I said, my voice carrying across the parking lot. Going home to protect my children from the media circus you created with your lies. But as we pushed through the crowd toward our car, I could hear Carol's voice behind us, speaking to whoever was still listening. That reaction tells you everything you need to know. An innocent man doesn't run from questions about his children's safety. Even in retreat, she was winning. The drive home felt like moving through a nightmare. News vans lined our street, reporters with microphones clustered on the sidewalk, and our house looked like a crime scene under the glare of camera lights. But as we pulled into our driveway, I noticed something that made my heart race with hope rather than dread. There was Detective Morrison from the local police department, and she was arresting someone. Carol. What the hell? Sarah breathed, and we both jumped out of the car. Detective Morrison approached us with a grim expression. Mr. and Mrs. Thompson. We need to talk. Your mother-in-law has been charged with filing false police reports, insurance fraud, and welfare fraud related to multiple GoFundMe campaigns. How did you? I started. Anonymous tip came in about 2 hours ago, Morrison said. Someone sent us a very detailed breakdown of her activities over the past few years, complete with documentation. Bank records, fake medical reports, photoshopped documents. Whoever compiled this information was very thorough. I looked at Sarah, confused, but she was staring past me toward the street. Following her gaze, I saw Uncle Mike walking toward us, his face set in grim determination. Mike? Sarah called out. I couldn't let it continue, he said quietly. After hearing about the fake cancer, seeing how she was destroying your family. I've been keeping track of her lies for 2 years. My wife Linda works at a bank. She's been suspicious of Carol's financial stories since the break-in that coincidentally happened right before a big gambling debt came due. Detective Morrison nodded. Mr. Henderson provided us with evidence of at least 4 separate fraud schemes. The fake cancer GoFundMe, the deceased grandmother medical fund, false insurance claims, and welfare benefits obtained under false pretenses. But the CPS report, I started. Has been withdrawn, Morrison interrupted. Turns out your mother-in-law called them from the church bathroom during the funeral reception before she even claimed to have seen any bruises on your daughter. CPS doesn't appreciate being used as a weapon in family disputes. The relief hit me so hard I thought my knees might give out. So our kids are fine. CPS will still do a welfare check, but it's routine now, not urgent intervention. And given the source of the report, they're treating it as harassment rather than genuine concern. Behind us, our front door opened and Emma came running out, followed by our babysitter and little Michael. Emma crashed into my legs with the force of a small missile. Daddy. Why are there so many people? Is Grandma Carol going to jail? Through the chaos of reporters and flashing cameras, I heard Carol's voice from the back of the police car. This is all a misunderstanding. I'm trying to protect my grandchildren. But nobody was listening anymore. The crowd of relatives who'd followed us from the funeral were standing on our lawn, watching the woman who'd manipulated them for years get exactly what she deserved. Mark walked over, his face a mixture of anger and relief. Jake, Sarah. I'm so sorry. I should have seen it sooner. We all should have, Sarah said, holding Michael close. But it's over now. As the police car pulled away with Carol inside, the reporters dispersed, and our extended family began to leave, I realized something profound had happened. The nuclear option I'd been so afraid to deploy hadn't destroyed our family, it had finally freed us. The truth, as ugly as it was, had been worth the explosion. Our kids were safe, our marriage was stronger, and Carol's reign of manipulation was finally over. Some bridges are worth burning.